glass. As I was saying, there'll be an enormous amount of time to talk at morning tea. It's lovely. I'd now like to get to the next page of what is a regular part of our CBA forums, and it has been. When I was doing the acknowledgement, there was something just niggling me. I knew I'd forgotten something, and it was New South Wales Treasury. When we were looking at doing this, and would we just do ACE this year and not do the CBA forum? One of the things I looked at was what's been happening in New South Wales Treasury. And it's easy to say that there is so much happening in New South Wales Treasury that alone makes it worthwhile having this this conference. If you look around the world, I mentioned that some things have been happening in the UK. I didn't mention other things that have been happening in the federal jurisdictions or in the other states. One of the reasons is not much happens. New South Wales, I don't want to embarrass you, and I even tried to summarise this the other day when we were doing a lead into this. There is so much stuff going on in New South Wales, pushing the boundaries, trying new things, and do go to the presentations we've got later today, where other people from New South Wales Treasury will be presenting. They are, without being embarrassing, at the leading edge of doing most of the work around CBA in Australia. So we are delighted to have Alex present. That's your phone. And donating his phone to the association. Again, we'll have 30 minutes. We'll have plenty of time for questions. It's going to be a very rich presentation. So while you're sitting there, think of the question, write it down, and you'll be prepared for that opportunity that comes at question time. Hand you over to you, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Robert. That's a wonderful introduction. I don't think I've ever come up to a stage with so much hype and pressure, but we'll see what we can do for that. So yeah, thank you very much for having me. New South Wales Treasury and my division, the Centre for Economic Evidence, we've got a bit of a history with this conference, and it's always been a great day and a great chance to meet people and hear what's happening in the field. So I'm very excited to speak today. I'm Alex Petrillo. I'm the Acting Director for the Investment and Valuation Policy team in Treasury. I'm going to get it going. Okay, great. So I'd also like to acknowledge the Gadigal people and share my respects for the elders past and present. And I'll get to the agenda. So I've got written down, we are always busy in Treasury, but I think Robert already covered that. We've got a lot going on. So I picked out a few topics I think the group will find interesting. It's a bit of a whirlwind tour of what's been happening. So firstly, there's a quick reflection on where CBA sits in New South Wales government. Second, a quick overview of our recent guidance on carbon emissions, which many of you will be already familiar with. Then a quick recap of our recent updates to business case guidance and the parts of the business case I think are most interesting for CBA. And then finally, a very quick look at two tools we've published in the last year. So that's the Outcome Values Database and our technical note on choice modelling. And there'll be time for questions at the end, and the questions don't have to be quick. And then I'll be around for the rest of the day, and I won't be moving quickly, so it'll be easy to catch out there if you'd like to chat. That was the best joke in the whole presentation. That doesn't bode well. Okay, so the first step here is just some context setting about New South Wales Government CBA. So I am here representing New South Wales Treasury, as Robert gave us a very effusive build-up. And it was Treasury's 200th birthday last year. It's one of the oldest government departments in the world, and we're very proud of it. It's established in 1824, which I believe is almost exactly 100 years before the Economic Society. So you can imagine we functioned for 100 years without an economic society. I don't know how we made it. But there's some relevant Treasury quotes here I pulled out, and these are from our business case guidelines, which I'll talk to a little bit more later in the presentation. But for New South Wales Treasury, CBA is the best and broadest indicator of a proposal's likely impacts on community welfare. So it's very much at the centre of our thinking and our economic advice to government. And I think the word likely is also very helpful there, what we'll be talking about later. But it's not the only indicator. So New South Wales Treasury will balance its advice using all the information in the business case. So we're trying to contextualise CBA where it sits within a full evidence-based, evidence-informed decision process. A little more on Treasury. So I work in the Centre for Economics or Economic Evidence, or CEE division, which is a brand name we've had for a while. It used to stand for Centre for Evidence and Evaluation. It still does stand for evaluation. We just changed the name. So we're on a mission to promote and support evidence-informed decision-making. And several of my CEE colleagues are here today, scattered around the place if you see New South Wales Treasury. So please ask them all of your really difficult questions. and give me the easy ones now. So my team within CEE, and many of you know our regular director, Georgina Collins. I think she's presented here before, and she's on parental leave and we'll be back soon. So we are responsible for the New South Wales Government Investment Framework, which includes the New South Wales Government Guide to Cost Benefit Analysis, which is a guideline. We're very proud of all our guidelines. And the CBA guide sits within this investment framework that really covers the start to finish use of evidence to make good decisions. So starting at business case stage, CBA, going through the benefits management and evaluation. And ideally, we're aiming for that circle of evidence where we can have evaluation evidence that can feed back into the ex-ante analysis of future proposals. That is always the goal. And reflecting a bit on where we're at in the CBA journey in New South Wales. So I think the requirement for CBA is well established, the practice is well established and regularly done. There's a fantastic community of experts on CBA New South Wales, which you can all see by looking around today. And there are a lot of great tools and resources out there in the world, some of which a lot of which you'll be hearing about today in different sessions. You can see I left a note to myself in the slides here to collect pictures of some of the guides, which I did not get around to. So that might be a clearer sign that I didn't use AI to prepare this presentation. This was all the human touch. And so, yeah, some reflections from my personal view of where we're at on CBA. I think it's in a maturity phase that we're in. So we're doing deep thinking about these kind of topics. And I think where we're focused on at the moment is on improving impact and relevance of CBA for decision making, building up from a base of rigorousness that I think has been built up through really intense and difficult work over years by practitioners. And we have a base of rigorousness and trust in CBA, and impact and relevance is where I think our current focus is in Treasury. So we want to be sure that CBA is speaking to the questions that the public expects economists to be thinking about, and we're giving decision makers things that they can use and answer the questions they care about. So a few areas where I picked out where I can see the theme of sort of maturity and impact. Firstly, broadening valuations. So broadening valuations out to portfolios and services that are currently under-described by CBA, and cross-promoting presentations throughout this. So I'd recommend the Valuing Life, Health and Injury with my colleague Kusha at 2:15 p.m. One of these rooms is a great piece of work. But there is, at the moment, a significant variance, I think many would see, between the different types of projects in terms of the established techniques and valuations that they have available, and therefore how challenging it is to produce consistent CBAs that quantify a good range of benefits. So classically, the typical pattern is a more economic infrastructure with a history of CBA, particularly in transport. We'll have the deepest bench of CBA techniques and quantified benefits. And then when we move into programs like human services, many of which are aimed at improving health and well-being for disadvantaged cohorts, there's fewer sort of off-the-shelf quantified benefits. And it was fantastic to hear Peter talking about the impact evaluation and how important it is to have this evidence base on impact evaluation to feed into CBA, particularly in the more human services area. So yeah, there's great work happening across government, across various governments and practices on broadening out CBA. And that also requires us, I think, as we're doing that, to think carefully about how CBA can fairly and reasonably reflect the lived experiences of stakeholders that we're affecting there. And building on that topic, another thing Treasury is really heavily invested in is representing first the values, rights, interests and cultures of First Nations peoples and communities in our economic analysis. And I'd very much recommend my colleagues Laura and Steve who are presenting on their brilliant First Nations investment framework at 11 a.m. today. This is mostly advertising this presentation. So the First Nations investment framework was published in October 2024. And it really speaks in a fantastic way to building trust, understanding, and genuine relationships with First Nations communities when we're developing initiatives that are going to affect those communities. It's a guide to good practice, and it includes case studies and examples. It's really well presented on the website, so I do encourage everyone to go and have a look at that and attend the presentation. And there's also an appendix in there on cost-benefit analysis, and the authors, which is our First Nations Economic Wellbeing team, have also published a research paper. Is there an echo? I don't know, I'm just me hearing that. Okay, never mind. On valuing First Nations culture in CBA, which I also strongly recommend. Yes, and so then the last 2 points there, we're doing a lot of deep thinking about risk and uncertainty and distributional analysis. core parts of CBA, and we're thinking all the time about how we can strengthen those practices. And I think they're really crucial to building impact and building acceptance and relevance for CBA. So risk and uncertainty, foundational features of addressing complex public policy problems. I think we all know when we're talking about the most difficult unsolved problems, there's going to be risk and uncertainty throughout. But despite this, I think the perception of CBA popularly in the popular imagination tends to be focused around producing this single one number benefit cost ratio that sort of proves whether a project is going to succeed or fail even before it's started. I think you can see that in sort of media coverage when there's reporting on benefit cost ratios. And I acknowledge, like BCRs, the single point estimates, they are important and they are useful, and they have wide acceptance, which is very valuable for economics. But there's much more value that we can extract from the process of doing CBA. And I think Robert brought that out with some of the quotes when we're talking about it. It's the process and learning of doing CBA. And we are looking for ways to bring out more of that. So we expanded the treatment of risk and uncertainty in our 2023 updated the CBA guide. And our disaster cost benefit framework, so yet another CE product that's online, also from 2023 is representing a big part of our thinking about how to embed, really put that risk and uncertainty right inside the CBA rather than a separate piece. And that one's really tackling how to make CBA as informative as possible for really high impacts, catastrophic low impact events, which is quite a challenge, I think, for classic CBAs. It's something we're always thinking about. And the last point before I get into a few of the specific products is on distributional analysis. I think distributional analysis is a recurring theme at conferences like this, and it should continue to be. Distributional analysis, it's always been part of Treasury CBA guidance. We think where the costs and benefits are falling across different groups within New South Wales, it's a key consideration for understanding the impact of a policy. You really can't talk about a policy without thinking about who is benefiting and who is bearing the costs. But I do think, and we've heard from many practitioners, this analysis can be really challenging to do within a quantitative CBA, where it's data limitations or various challenges. And it can be challenging to integrate the reporting of the distributional results into that headline result, especially when there is that focus on having a one number BCR. So it's something that we're actively thinking about. And I'm sure a lot of people in the audience are also spending their time thinking about that. So please, if you catch us anywhere across, anyone from Treasury, please talk about distributional analysis to us and let us know what your thoughts are, what you're thinking on and working on. So I think it's a crucial feature of the future and the way to keep CBA relevant. So that is my sort of overview and intro, and we've got now to talk about a few of the specifics products. We have a water break. Was on the most interesting slides, carbon emissions in the investment framework. This is a Treasury policy and guideline document that we published in December of 2024. So this is a long time in the making. So if you're a regular attendee at ESA events, you may have already heard CE present in detail about the carbon emissions framework at the ACE conference this year or at last year's CBA forum. So I won't go into great detail, partly because I'm not super expert on carbon, but I will give you the overviews of this policy and why it's important and why we're so proud of it. So the TPG, which is a policy and guideline, it sets out requirements for considering carbon impacts throughout the investment framework. So it's applicable through the whole life cycle. Before investment, so typically in a business case, we are thinking about emissions, but also in post-investment evaluation, it provides values that can be used on the evaluation side as well to think about carbon emissions. So it establishes values for carbon to be used in New South Wales government CBA, and we always want to note this as a shadow price for putting a value on this non-market output to be used in CBA, so it's not impacting prices or taxes or anything like that. And the guide will be reviewed every 2 years or in response to major developments. So I realized this font choice maybe wasn't the best, but all the information is there on the slide, I guarantee. So the guide requires consideration of the impact of proposals on emissions that occur within New South Wales and emissions, regardless of where they occur, from the manufacture and transport of materials that are then consumed within New South Wales. It does not require the inclusion of emissions that occur outside New South Wales from the use of products that were produced in New South Wales, although that can be produced where it's of interest. And so for the technically minded, I believe that covers scope 1 and 2 emissions and upstream scope 3 emissions. So various types of emissions that are considered in this guideline is embodied carbon. So there's the emissions that are associated with the creation, maintenance, and disposal of assets. There's operational carbon, emissions associated with the operation of assets, particularly energy and water usage. We have enabled emissions, which are the emissions associated with activities that are enabled by the proposal. So I think the example there is extra vehicle trips that might occur due to a road project. And finally, you can also consider circular economy impacts. So where there is the potential for reuse, recycling, or recovery of a project to reduce future emissions in projects, that can be considered as well. And our colleagues at Infrastructure New South Wales have published this great detailed guidance on measuring embodied carbon. And our TPG links to that and links to a few other technical guidance that provides instructions on how to measure these for project teams, which no doubt is very complicated. Now, the next one is, when should emissions be valued? Not time-wise, but when is it for which projects? So we established when carbon emissions need to be included in CBA for New South Wales government. It's not a universal requirement because it does seek to balance out the costs of effort of doing this analysis against the benefits of doing so. So we require it to be done where we think it's going to be impactful and justify the costs. So emissions basically must be accounted for in capital proposals that are more than $100 million, which unfortunately is most of them in this economy, I think. And for other projects, when valuing emissions is likely to materially impact the results or decision making. So a bit of discretion there, but the emphasis on materially impact, we don't want this analysis done just as a box ticking exercise, but rather where it's really impactful. And now, so our CBA guide update was, as I mentioned, in early 2023. It seems like just yesterday, but we established in that guide the need and the importance of considering carbon emissions in CBA, and we included some placeholder values at that time. So this December 24 update is now moving us forward to the next stage. And the key update really is the production of these New South Wales specific carbon values that were developed using a marginal abatement cost approach, which I'll talk about a bit more in the next slide. But other updates include this guidance now on incorporating emissions into the consideration of strategic alignment. So the government has legislated targets, has strategies for net zero. So there's guidance on how to consider that as part of situating a proposal within the strategy of government. And there's also a recommendation there that we should consider lower carbon options in business cases. For example, upgrades of existing assets or adaptive reuse of things as opposed to new builds. So we ask for the consideration of lower carbon options. It's a new piece of guidance. Now, finally, the carbon values themselves. And here they are. I'll give you a moment to admire them. Wonderful. So we have published a central set of values by years, and these are all denominated in $2024 real terms. There is also, not here on the slide, a low and high set of values. So we ask, we require for sensitivity analysis in projects to use the low and high values in addition to the central values, which is a general point of emphasis. And I talked a bit about risk and uncertainty before. Sensitivity analysis is sort of our best friend in terms of cost-benefit analysis. So where the values came from is the New South Wales Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water engaged Deloitte to calculate these values. So congratulations to Deloitte. Nice to be in the home of the MAC work right here. And their methodology is described in a great report. It's called the New South Wales Carbon Values Report. It's online and the same page where the carbon TPG is. So I strongly recommend that for people who are interested in the method on carbon. So I won't deep dive into the modeling approach now, but in broad strokes, the values are based on a target consistent approach. So what they represent is the efficient cost for New South Wales, the estimated efficient cost for New South Wales of reaching our legislated emissions targets. So there is an alternative approach, which is to estimate the social cost of carbon, where we're estimating the damage to society that these carbon emissions are doing, and therefore looking at the benefit of reducing those emissions. We prefer the target consistent approach because the social cost approach would not have accounted for the legislated net zero targets, which are strong and in there. There's a lot of disagreement over the appropriate modelling assumptions for social cost. And the estimates tend to vary widely across jurisdictions. And in our view, most governments are moving towards a target consistent approach. So the way the target consistent estimate is produced, and climate experts in the room, I'm sure there's several, please forgive me in advance if I butcher the explanation. But basically, you identify all the potential emissions reduction solutions and their capacity maximum capacity for reducing carbon emissions. And then you line them all up from the cheapest to the most expensive, so you can visually imagine that. And then work out, according to your target, how many tons of emissions you need to reduce, go up the line cumulatively, and then you draw the line when you hit the solution that gets you to your target. Right, so the cost of the last solution you hit, which is the most expensive one you're using, that is the marginal abatement cost. Right, yeah, that's the most expensive solution that you will need to use based on our estimates to hit your legislated emissions targets. And so that last one is representing the efficient cost of emissions reduction. How's that? So, yeah, great. Okay, I'm sure you can all picture it mentally or have already seen it. Great. So that's a piece of work we're very proud of, but it is not the only thing we're very proud of. We're modest, but not for the purposes of this presentation. So this next up is our business case guidelines update. So the business case guidelines, you may have seen some media releases, were significantly reformed in November of 2024. And so the business cases cover all the stages of business case. It's not a specific CBA guidance, but I do think it's relevant. Most of the CBA that occurs in New South Wales government is for the purposes of business cases. And I'm sure a lot of people in the room have been involved in the production of business cases and were affected by this update. So here are some key features of the update that I'll let you browse through. What the points we've got here are really emphasizing is that the updates made the requirements more streamlined, simplified, and proportionate. We're really trying to emphasize this proportionality of scaling the effort and the cost of analysis towards the complexity, size, and risk of the project. And that's a theme that you'll see throughout. So the key point here is a business case should include only the information and analysis that is needed to inform the investment decision at hand. And once investment decisions are made, further analysis can be done. So we've also, you can see here, improved the structure of the guide, simplified, consolidated some things, and emphasized, really that description of proportionality. I think proportionality is a thing that we've talked about for a long time and often heard, can you describe it in a little bit more practical detail? And that's what the guidelines are attempting to do. And we've published some user-friendly templates to assist with that. Hopefully some people have found useful in the room. And lots of nodding. So here's an overview of the types of business cases. Some people have told me it's difficult to remember all the different types of business cases, but I disagree. I think it's very easy. No. So you don't need to commit this to memory. It's always online, unless you're really in need of conversation starters for networking drinks. Feel free to use this. So the key takeaway about here is that we're scaling business cases to the scope of the problem being addressed. And so the format of the business case is going to change depending on the size and complexity of the project. And another point of emphasis, we start up here at the top with the go, no-go assessment, or gate zero assessment, it's sometimes called. This is something that's been around in New South Wales government for a while, but we're making the renewed point of emphasis because what we're doing at the go, no-go is ensuring that the problem that the proposal is aimed at is a significant, well-established problem, and that addressing it is a priority of government at the moment. So we want to establish that this is a problem we really want solved and solved soon before we start investing in a business case that spends more effort deep diving into the solutions. So once you get your go, you can go ahead, and the type of business case is going to diverge depending on size, risk, and complexity of the project. So a very large and complex proposal, like a new metro line, will go through 2 stages of business cases. So that's firstly a preliminary business case down here in the bottom left. And that's narrowing a wide range of options down to a short list of options for further consideration. And then we'll move on to a full business case to support an investment decision. Moderately sized, moderately risky projects, relatively speaking, because they are still very large, like some new schools or school upgrades, will produce a lean business case up here in the top left, which is a new type of business case that we're very happy about. And this is mirroring a full business case, but certain components are going to be less developed and require less inputs to reflect the lower risk of the project. And then finally, a routine project, like say a small intersection upgrade or a new toilet block in a school, will not produce a business case, they'll rather produce a short form assessment, which is a short document that's applying business case concepts at a simplified level. And now CBA, so I've gone too long without saying CBA, can feature in all of these different types of business cases, but to different degrees of development. So what we call a comprehensive CBA, which is probably what many in the room are used to producing, will be required for full or lean business cases. For a preliminary business case, we'll ask for a preliminary CBA. So it's one thing that's easy to remember, which is a less developed, less detailed, might rely on some rule of thumb assumptions or not include primary research. And the go, no-go, or short form assessment, we say it should have a conceptual CBA. So that is limited to key points based on existing information and evidence. So not asking to go out and do new research or reinvent the wheel, not necessarily quantify everything. But it's another point of emphasis where we think CBA thinking is always valuable, whether or not you're doing the full quantitative process. So, bringing a holistic lens to consider all the costs, all the benefits, unintended consequences, and giving a sense of the relative scale of how those things interact with each other. Are these benefits very large compared to the costs of it? Is this a small benefit? What's the most important thing? So we think that thinking is helpful even in the reduced form of business cases. Now, here is some new guidance. Here is some new guidance. So this answers a very frequent and a very good question that we get a lot, which is, what is Treasury looking for in a business case when Treasury is reading this and forming its advice? So we've aimed to enlighten everyone with highlighting some 4 elements, which are strategic fit, societal impact, affordability, and deliverability, that come together and form our sort of holistic, evidence-informed advice giving matrix. So we do expect CBA to be the key word on societal impact in terms of the value of the project, social, economic, social, cultural, environmental. And I'll call back to the quote I started out with, that Treasury does consider CBA to be the best and broadest indicator of the impact on community welfare. However, what the framework here is doing is situating that and contextualizing that CBA result within the broader framework, the holistic evidence-informed approach. So we consider strategic fit, so thinking about whether there's a clear case for change, whether there's a significant problem to be addressed that's been identified and laid out. Is there a need for timely government intervention specifically? And how have stakeholders been engaged? Also an important part of that strategic fit. What are stakeholders' views and how have those been reflected in the project? Affordability, which really has an emphasis on testing that the whole of life costs of a project have been really well developed and well understood. And deliverability, which I think we all know is key. And there's plenty of theoretically great projects, I think, that have had issues with practical delivery, thinking about capacity of expertise to deliver it and market capacity. So these are all of the ingredients that go into the advice pot. And here's another new piece of guidance I think is really interesting for CBA and practitioners and users of CBA is our options guidance. We've received really good reviews for this section, actually, in terms of adding clarity about options requirements and tightening the scope. So a full or lean business case requires assessment of a base case and at least 2 realistic options. And within those options now, we've got a requirement to assess a minimum viable product and for capital projects, a non-build option on an if not, why not basis. So we're giving a little more specificity and guidance about the kinds of options we want to see assessed in business case and CBA. We want to see something that is the minimum possible thing that will tick all the objectives that have been outlined in the project. There's also some advice quoted here on the slide, which I won't go through in detail, but identifying that, developing broad, thorough options, it's a really challenging thing. It's something that we think is worth spending a lot of time on, but we acknowledge it's really challenging. So identifying a bit of things to watch out for. So watching out for biases that can creep into optioneering, giving the advice to really leverage past evaluation findings of other projects and diverse stakeholder perspectives as really strong sources for looking at a wide range of feasible options. And additionally, the guideline also highlights the value of thinking about staging, deferrals, and real options. So things that can preserve flexibility so that the project over the future can respond to changing conditions is something we see a lot of value in as well. Now, coming to the end, last couple of minutes, just a really quick highlight of a few of the new tools and resources that we have available. So there's a wide range of resources and tools on the newsouthwales.gov.au website under CBA business case and evaluation headings. So I'll highlight just 2 of the things. So that really I recommend you go and seek out and have a look at. I think they're quite interesting. There's the outcome values database and our choice modeling primer, which is a new technical note. So the outcome values database, which we call the OVD, is a publicly available database of dollar valuations for a wide range of outcomes. In fact, 279 outcomes at last count. And these are recommended for use where it's applicable and appropriate in cost-benefit analysis. And please explore this database if you're working on a project, because we see it's a great opportunity to increase repeatability, increase consistency between CBA. And I think the use of common valuations over time it really helps to build up transparency and ultimately credibility with CBA when we have these common values that people can see where the source is, see where they come from, and see that different projects are being compared on an equal footing. And this is a perfect time to give all the credit out there to our delivery agency partners across the New South Wales government and the experts they've commissioned, who produced a lot of great research that has gone in and made this OVD possible. So it's populated because of the hard work of our agency partners and economists. Thank you very much. And I'll skip on now. I think I'm going to hit the time quite well. So our last one I'm pointing out here is the choice modelling technical note, which is now live on our website. It's on the CBA guide page. This is introducing choice modelling for public policy and offers practical guidance on its application, survey design, and presentation of results. So choice modelling here is referring to statistical models that can be used to estimate monetary values for non-market items. And the focus of the note is on stated preference techniques, which is the wide world of surveying and experimenting on people to extract their preferences. Not extract in a aggressive way, but ask for survey responses. So choice modelling, very complex and wide topic that I won't cover in 50 seconds, but please do go and have a look at the primer. It's aiming to provide a general overview of what choice modelling is. So it's giving a bit of an introduction and a primer for those who are new to choice modelling, as well as give experienced practitioners a bit of more guidance on what Treasury views as best practice, and a framework that Treasury may use to assess survey results and their applicability for use in economic appraisals. And I just note it does not introduce any new mandatory guidance, which is something I know everyone's always concerned. And that is the end of the tour of everything we have going on. And here's our copyright.
I'm staggered. We have a second. It's like one of those sports where you've got to finish right at the last minute, like a time trial in racing cars. You've come right on time, which means we have 15 minutes for questions, which is wonderful. I think you've all been tasked with thinking of questions while you're there. Has anyone? Now, the other thing is people down the back. There are lots of seats. So for other sessions, do come through. There's been plenty of seats to do that. This room is going to, I'll do a little of logistics too. We'll go to, while you're thinking of questions, after this, depending on what stream you are, if you look in the program, you'll either stay in this room. The other room is going to be behind the coffee cart. Remember, your ticket is not only, your badge is not only your chance to chat to other people, but your ticket for free coffee. And then there is the other streams will be upstairs. If you're in the other streams, all you have to do is go up the stairs and walk towards Tasmania on that way, and you will find the next presentation. So while we're doing that, do we have any questions, please? Okay, we'll take the one at the back there. Sorry, first.
How sensitive is that to variation? Also, over time, as things get more factory with carbon, or is new to.
Great, thank you. So a repeat for the online. Yes, so the question is about the target consistent approach to estimating carbon values and the vulnerabilities and errors in there. So yes, a couple of points I think to emphasize. It's an evolving field. I think it's a work in progress. And so we're committed to revising the guidelines every 2 years or in response to major developments. I notice the values over time, they grow in future years in real terms, reflecting greater uncertainty about the future and the usage of, I think, direct abatement, more expensive methodologies in the future. And we do, again, put emphasis on, I think I said sensitivity analysis is our best friend. So we're kind of in uncharted territory. We're pushing into the frontier of what's possible in measuring carbon. So we do want to see, we have a central value. We do want to see a low value as well, a high value, and see what the impact is and how sensitive the projects we're looking at are to these small changes in assumptions. So it's something we think about. It's something we're conscious of, and we're looping back around every 2 years to keep looking at it. But yeah, for the moment, we think that was the strongest approach we had in the tool belt at this point.
Right, so we'll now take a question from over here. Thank you.
Hi, Alex, Jason, not from New South Wales Treasury. With the outcomes value database, some of these benefits and costs will be estimated in very specific conditions. Where can CBA practitioners go for more guidance on how, which context they can be applied in stringently?
Well, excellent question about the outcome values database. So there is more guidance. Can you tell me where there's more guidance available on the outcome values database? So I believe there is a user guide attached with the outcome values database. And I think it's a good point. There's a real consistency of benefits and the consistent use of valuations across CBA, something I've been really passionate about in my career. I think is very valuable, but it does. I think there's a similar question about the external validity for randomized control trials that you could apply as well to standardized valuations for cost-benefit analysis. So these things do come out of one context. We're applying them in broad contexts. I would emphasize, I think the real value of CBA, of having these common valuations, is it does build trust, builds transparency. It certainly saves a lot of time and effort, which makes it more likely that we'll have cost-benefit analysis for various projects, and that we have something to compare across time and compare between projects. And I think there's a lot of value in that. And it's incumbent on us as advice givers and users of CBA to explain and put things in context for decision makers and explain where the vulnerabilities and the sensitivities are. Yeah.
Okay. Now we're back down to this end. Any other questions? Well, I'll take one question, but I will take, and one over here, sorry. Well, I can see everyone is dying for morning tea. I can just get that vibe. So we'll take two more questions, but I will throw one if I can. Treasury, you get a lot of CBAs submitted to you, don't you?
Yes, absolutely.
A lot of those go into Treasury, but we don't get to see them again because of commercial incompetence. Is there any prospect that at some stage, and particularly with the AI theme, that good CBAs are now being kept within that firewall? It would be nice for people in the room, and maybe even with the use of AI, to use those to learn from and build better. Is there any prospect of seeing something happen in that space? Or have you got any suggestions?
I see a lot of potential on the ex post evaluation side for more publication, more sharing and learning. And Peter, I think there's an ACE evaluation library live online at the moment. So everyone, please check out the ACE evaluation library. Maybe we could get something similar at New South Wales Treasury. I don't want to tip our hand or anything. But evaluations are definitely a source. I think realistically, a lot of cost-benefit analysis that takes place for investment decision is likely to be cabinet in confidence, since it's informing cabinet decisions, and the prospects for wide-scale release of cost-benefit analysis might be limited. There are business case summaries. You can get some really good information from Infrastructure New South Wales and Infrastructure Australia that publishes summaries on their website. I encourage everyone, academics and practitioners, where you're able to publish and share knowledge. But it's definitely something we're conscious of. And by far the most common request we have is, can you give me an example of a good one when someone's starting a CBA? And we try our best to see what we can do, but within limits.
Okay. That was a somewhat self-interested question, because we're always looking for people who have a good cost-benefit analysis, do a case study and come. So if that happens to be you, do think about presenting next time, or maybe do a lunchtime presentation. We have two last questions before muffins. Yes.
Yeah, it's a good question about that consistency, between sectors and between jurisdictions. So between sectors, consistency is a big focus for us, and we try to put our effort, focus where it's going to do the most good, where there is the most, I guess, marginal product from investing our time, expertise and resources into sectors where there is less of a flaw, less capability. And I think we're making progress. In terms of across jurisdiction, I think we see ourselves as part of a community of practitioners and guidance makers across, and we all try to learn from each other. Value of Statistical Life, a project we are undertaking, I would think will be very helpful to other jurisdictions to adopt. Having said that, I also thought when we moved the discount rate to 5%, that would be very helpful for other jurisdictions, and they don't seem to have found it as helpful as we did. So I think having a strong community that can share knowledge and learn from each other. But I think jurisdictions probably choose to go their own way for their own purposes as well, which is probably overall strengthens the field, I imagine, to have the diversity of contested views.
We have time for one quick final question, one quick answer. You've been very patient. Thank you.
Commissioners often find that stakeholders, that particularly senior stakeholders, rely heavily on those indicators as the be all and end all. Do you have any advice around enacting a cultural change, or liaising with those stakeholders, I guess, change their perception around not just considering those indicators as the be all and end all, but considering the whole kind of economic appraisal and the reporting around it?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I think we're conscious. I know the UK's Green Book Review is conscious of this focus on BCRs and above or below 1 as being a big indicator. And it's fair enough that I think stakeholders will get caught up in that. It's the most visible indicator. It's the thing that gets reported. Do I have advice? I mean, I would point to what does Treasury look for in a business case. In our business case guide as an indicator, at least this central agency with some influence over money is looking at these other factors that we care about. Strategic fit, we care a lot about risk and uncertainty consideration to BCR. We care about good process and transparency. But I think probably the best advice is from other people in the room who are dealing with stakeholders and producing CBAs. And I think an opportunity like today, I know this is a bit of deflection of a question, but an opportunity like today where it's practitioners in the room all talking to each other and sharing advice. And I would love to hear the advice from experienced people in the room about how do you change people's minds? How do you get this overall view and really have a crack through if anyone's had successes or challenges? I suppose that's what the morning teas and lunches and drinks are for.
Now, thank you very much for the question. Thank you. As always, one of the highlights of the forum is the update from Treasury. So this very small present, which may or may not be a lower price point than the one for Federal Treasury, that's recognition of that. And
responsibility.
We will definitely start. Do grab a coffee. When up break, do move into the seats here or go upstairs. Do try and be in your rooms 5 minutes before. We have half an hour for morning tea. Enjoy.